The Civil War began in April 1861 when Confederates fired on Fort Sumter, which was in the mouth of Charleston Harbor. They fired on it on April 12th, 1861. They took control of it on April 14th, 1861. And then the following day, April 15th, Abraham Lincoln issued a call for 75,000 volunteers to come into federal service and put down this rebellion, as he called it, in South Carolina. Immediately following Fort Sumter and the call for troops, soldiers from the North started pouring into Washington, D.C. But to get there, of course, they have to go through Baltimore. That's the way the train lines run. This shouldn't have been a problem, except for the fact that Baltimore was still governed by an old law that prohibited having locomotives run through the city. For anybody who was traveling by train, the trains had to stop at President Street Station, and then the passengers either had to get off and walk to Camden Yards, or teamsters would come and hook the railroad cars up to horses and tow them through the city. This also should not have been a problem for all of these troops, except for the fact that Baltimore was a city with many, many Southern sympathizers in it. And these Southern sympathizers were angry at Lincoln for calling for troops and also wanted Maryland to secede. So if you put all of these together, what you wind up with is a powder keg that's waiting to explode. And that's what Baltimore was like. April 19th, 1861 is the day of what has come to be known as the Pratt Street Riots. What happened in this case is that troops from Pennsylvania and Massachusetts arrive at President Street Station. They know that they're probably going to run into one of these mobs of Southern sympathizers. They've actually been warned about it by their commanders. 6 or 7 cars of these big railroad cars now full of soldiers, 6 or 7 of them are able to get through the streets and make it all the way to Camden Yards. But this mob had been growing, and this mob blocked the tracks with sand. They actually pulled some ship anchors over and used those to make it impossible for the last couple of rail cars to get through. Those cars then return to President Street Station. The men get off the rail cars and start marching through the streets of Baltimore to get to Camden Yards. The crowd is incensed by the presence of these Pennsylvania and Massachusetts troops. They start throwing things at them. They're throwing bricks. They're throwing oyster shells. Gay Street was being paved at this point, and they pull up the paving stones and start hurling paving stones at the soldiers. At some point, somebody fires a shot, and it's one of those questions: was it one of the soldiers? Was it one of the mobsters? But then the soldiers take this as their cue to open fire, and they start firing into the crowd. When all the dust finally clears from it, accounts of the number of casualties differ. Historians put it at somewhere between 12 and 16 people killed. These are considered the first people actually killed in the Civil War.